A little change of pace from my normal videos talking about phones and tablets and laptops and mini PCs. I really enjoyed the new James Gunn Superman. It's getting its broader home video Blu-ray release, but in a wild example of happenstance, it's not the only comic book movie coming out on Friday. It's not even the only comic book film with the name Superman in the title coming out on Friday. A while before DC and Warner Brothers chose that day to release Superman, there was already another Superman film slated for release. A labor of love documentary from a great storyteller. I pinned Wes down just for a conversation, just to kind of catch up, see how he was doing, and to share some of his thoughts on producing the film, and a little chatter about this art form and how we can share it with others. And I'm so bummed out that we went the entire conversation, an hour-long podcast, and I didn't even get to show him my shirt, which is a really nerdy deep cut, but I've already digressed in my intro. Let's jump into a conversation with Wes Eastin and let's get real nerdy. Okay, so I feel like you've missed something really important. Your movie, it's about comic book shops, and obviously comic book shops exist because of comic books, which are superheroes. And I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I got to the very, very end of the movie. I watched the movie, I love the movie's great. Documentary is awesome. It actually made me kind of tear up. But I got to the very end of the video file that you sent, and there was no comic book shop cinematic universe at the very, very end of the credits. You had a mid-credits tease that people need to watch, but where was Thor's hammer in the New Mexican desert? What happened there, Wes? I feel we're kind of dropping the ball here.
So Brolin's people wouldn't get back with me. I mean, I couldn't even get Deadpool guy. What's his name?
Wow.
I forget. I haven't heard his name in 5 minutes, so my brain.
And for how much gin is featured prominently in this documentary, you'd think he'd be all over it.
Aviation, only the finest. Yeah, Reynolds people would get back with me. So actually, I did have a bit that I wanted to do that I realized I could keep adding things the rest of my life and never finish the movie. But what I wanted to do was just it'd be perspective from the camera. There'd be an empty chair and a door in the background. And there'd be a few beats. You'd hear like muffled running feet coming to the door. Door would burst open and Kevin Smith would come in and say, "Okay, I'm here. We can do it." And I'd say, "No, we're done. Sorry." And that would be the end. That's because adorable. He is in everything related to comics,
I feel the cameo you have that I will not spoil, it got a legit audio out of my face reaction. It was a lovely little sign off to have at the end of such a meaningful documentary. Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this kind of off the cuff podcast conversation. This is a buddy of mine. This is a good friend of mine. His name is Wes Eastin, and he is about to drop an incredible documentary, a love letter to the comic book shop and the community that comes with this kind of fandom and with this kind of passion. Wes, thank you so much for jumping in and chatting with me about your documentary that I love.
Thanks, man. And I have to apologize. I looked down. I didn't know that this was when I entered the field for my title that it would be for.
I didn't call you on it at all. It was totally appropriate.
I was just like, God Emperor, if I can be anything, I want to be that. And then, I'll run in the sand and become a worm and,
Sure. I mean, if you can't be Batman, be God Emperor, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. House Atreides for 1,000 years. House Atreides.
Love it. So, Wes, you were kind enough to send along a copy of your documentary, Shopping for Superman.
Yes.
No, I realized we've made it this far and I haven't even mentioned what the name of your documentary is. So
right.
I gave it the pregnant pause there just to say that you made this thing and it does exist. Shopping for Superman. I'd like to just start. Where did the idea for this come from? There's a lot of comics media that's gone mass market, that's gone really broad.
Sure.
What was this? What was sort of the inception of this story that you wanted to tell?
I'm sure there's a more artful explanation for where it came from that someone could Steve Jobsify and make way more fascinating. But what it came from was I've always loved comic book shops when I was a kid. Total dorks, total Star Trek dork. I mean, you and I bonded
Yeah,
over the Trek pretty hard. But at the time, young people may not know this. If any young people listen to podcasts anymore, I don't know what they're doing
there's no way
anymore.
to know. Yeah,
Yeah, as a kid, liking comics was a dorky thing. It was not
yeah,
the coolest kids. If they did it, they read comics in their closet. They were very quiet about comics love. But it was this one place that I could walk in and I could talk to any person in there, any adult, any person my age. And everyone in my family was encouraging it because I was reading, no matter what the
yeah.
material was. And it was always age appropriate because the shop owners would be like, "What are you doing around that Lady Rawhide comic? That's not for you." If
Hey,
anyone
maybe,
remembers.
maybe not Vampirella yet. Yet
you know,
you'll get there,
No,
but
it's a good one. You'll love it. Um, all that being said, Gen 13, etc. There were a lot of attractive reasons as a kid to want to read things at my age level and then beyond. Because I mean, as kids, we always wanted to read, experience anything that the older kids
yeah,
were doing too. So it was a great, like, well, you get them in young with Superman, Batman, whatever. So I just loved the comic book store so much and that environment. And years later, I'm working in film and television. I end up moving to Los Angeles, and some of my friends, we'd all been making like short comedy videos and that sort of thing. But some of them got very ambitious and said, "I want to make a
yeah,
feature film. I'm just going to do it." And
yeah,
I just admired that so much. But I remembered even those short movies we did, they cost a good bit of money. There's so much coordination. And friends of mine would say, "How do you do this? Like, how do you get so many
yeah.
people together on a weekend when they have anything else to do?"
Right.
And I got to thinking, like, well, I probably couldn't make a feature film without a lot of money and connections and equipment, but with a documentary, if I focus on something that I care about, then I'll be able to go back to that well as often as I want. And so the comic book shops seem like the right call because it's this thing I've said for years I love so much, but I really don't know anything about at the time. I'm sitting there like,
Yeah.
well, there's my favorite stores I grew up with and that were meaningful to me, but where are the what is the broader context here? Because I didn't know about comic book stores until like the early 90s when I cracked a yellow pages and saw like there was an ad that had Marvel characters around
Right.
the ad. I was like, oh, that's definitely for me. Where is this? How do I find that? And I was just being bored on a weekend. Otherwise you would find them in the newsstand, the grocery store, the pharmacy, that sort of thing. But to find a
And then
store where
especially with like the rise of big box stores, there was a while there I was buying, all of my trade graphic novels from like not what was not Barnes and Noble. What was the
B.
other one?
Dalton, Walden
And
Books.
yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. I didn't really discover comic book stores until I was getting into gaming. Because there was often
Interesting.
like in New Mexico, you couldn't sustain like a board game store and a comic book store as separate stores, so they would
Right.
get mashed together, and be sitting there like slinging Vampire the Masquerade card games and stuff like that. And then I'd like look over at the rack and like, oh, let me pick this up. Oh, there's this weird like Leonard Nimoy comic from this now defunct publisher, Primordials.
Primordials.
Primordials?
I could see
Primordials.
that. Yeah, I could see the cover in my head. Like, what
And
was it?
and
Like dinosaurs, like
Yes,
dinosaur
exactly. It's
creatures.
like evolved dinosaurs. That is way too nerdy and deep cut. There's like two people in my audience that just went flip yeah. But that to me, like I never cottoned on to the social aspect of that comics as its own until gaming kind of brought me in there too. And then I kind of liken it, like we've got the library as like a community center, and then we've got like the comic book shop is like the neighborhood pub. Obviously, it exists because they want you to come in and spend some money, but that almost feels like a secondary aspect to the regulars that go in there, the arguments that you're constantly having about different characters and the writing and the art style.
Well, and some people have actually taken that model and run with it. I know in Atlanta, there's my parents' basement, or maybe it's just parents' basement. I've been there a couple of times. You can have a drink and a bite. And while talking to a friend, I was like, "Oh, have you ever read Bone by Jeff Smith?" And she was like, "I've heard of it. I think I started it one time." And I just got up and went over to trades wall and found the bound, the complete version of it, and I was just like, here, my gift to you. Like, it's a great idea to get nerds full of booze and near comics. They could be like, here, I'm going to buy this for you.
I kind of feel like there's a simpatico. There's something about the sort of classic fandom and that middle window of comics from the 70s to the late 90s, where we kind of crafted a generation of fans, but they were insular. Like there wasn't a broad explosion of this media. There wasn't a broad
Mm.
acceptance of this media until we started getting movies like Blade and Spider-Man. And then it kind of took off and got a bit bigger. But I feel like there's just been the struggle to get folks who are genuinely interested in these characters and these stories to go back and check out where these stories came from.
Yeah, I think it's funny, and this I just had this thought. I probably should have pretended like, and this is really where the film came from. But i in all honesty, like most problems we have in our lives, the issues we have socially, politically, whatever, even in
Hmm.
our work lives, I think it all stems from uh, problems with communication. Like art is
Yeah,
communication. Comics are communicating ideas, story, and the ideas are definitely buried in the story as subtext. What are the goals? What are the main objectives? But most comics are there telling you, be these are ways to be a good person, or here's how to maybe navigate a moral dilemma.
right.
Some things aren't always black and white. Sometimes there's gray. That there's a variety to morality, that kind of thing. And I think the entertainment aspect is definitely there, but a lot of people have seen those challenges in some of these stories and said, oh my god, this is incredible. And
Yeah,
I can relive this moment where someone's in this crisis and it's all in my head. It's not a movie that can just be rewound or fast forwarded. And I can hand that, you know, um, that blueprint of a story,
yeah.
of a motion graphic in my head to someone else and be like, here, now you're the director. It's all laid out for you. The storyboards are there, but you're going to connect these dots for yourself and experience this in a way. And
And
I
we can share a vernacular off of that, but we've
absolutely.
just had two unique experiences with the same.
For sure. It's very much that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Darmok, where, you and I can speak in
Speaking of metaphor.
metaphor. We can speak in colloquial metaphor.
Wes and JC on the YouTube. Oh
Right.
no.
They're grins wide. So for the two
um
people left watching this,
I know, right? Because the movie does discuss this, and I'm so happy your documentary is bringing up some of these points that I've kind of felt but haven't been able to articulate very well. My grandmother was a school teacher in rural New Mexico, and she was a huge fan of comic books because there were issues with literacy rates, and you could get a kid super into Spider-Man. And then she did the same thing on me. As soon as I was done with like a Spider-Man comic, she would put an illustrated Clash of the Titans in my hand, comic book version of Clash of the Titans, and that exposed me to all of these other stories, and they're so similar. Peter Parker's inability to get Aunt May her medication while also fighting Doc Ock is just like Greek tragedy.
like socially, we connect a lot of dots from these older stories, from these classics, and they get reused time and time again. I mean, there's a reason why Beowulf has staying power in terms of a
Right?
story
Yeah.
of an army versus a monster or two monsters. It's really fascinating, and getting kids reading is just so crucial. I mean, the two organizations that have been really great, that I've spoken to while making this was Reading is Fundamental. If you remember
Hmm.
them, great
Yeah.
organization. Dr. Erin Bailey, she's a part of the film. She does an interview with us, and she even came out to see the film at San Diego Comic Con. She happened to live in San
Nice.
Diego. She's like, it'd be great to see you and see the film, and I was like, come on down, please. And the other is BINC, BINC. It's the Book Industry Charity Foundation. But they help comic shops and bookstores that are in trouble. That the
Nice.
store may be underwater for some reason, the manager's sick, or has had some health issues, or the store suffered some kind of tragedy. They have
Right.
grants for shop owners to help them get back on their feet and stay afloat because showing Dr. Bailey actually put it the best, in my opinion. She said, we let young people know what we value the most by the things that we keep. just out in the open and on hand. So
Yeah.
when you have a comic book shop in a town or a bookstore in a town and they go away, we're telling young people we actually didn't value that. I mean, forget
Right.
free market and so forth. We're literally saying like no one cared enough to keep this open and keep this available, but the things that both do are invaluable. I mean, it's not a short list to describe what a comic book shop provides a local community, not just comics. You can get those anywhere.
I think what moved me so much about the individual stories that are presented in your documentary is every shop is unique because every shop is being run by a singular force of will running this brick and mortar shop, literally standing out on their sidewalk sometimes just saying, hey, have you read this comic? And someone walks by and goes, okay, let me see. Like that I mean, sorry, I just diatribed all over that point. The point I was trying to
Yeah.
make is it's not surprising to me one person in a comic book shop maybe falls ill. That's a disaster waiting to happen for that comic book shop.
Can do. I One of my favorite shops from Los Angeles, down in the Gardena area, was Jeffrey's Comics. Loved Jeff, and he and his partner Eddie actually bought the oldest comic book store in Southern California, which was Heidi Ho Comics out there in Santa
Mm-hmm.
Monica, and neither store is there now. Jeff
Yeah.
had some health issues, and he's told me later, you have to. This has to be such a part of your life that if you're down for the count for weeks or months, you know, everyone else can only do so much, but at the end of the day, it's on you to get
Yeah.
these things done. And just broke my heart because while making this, I kept thinking like, well, at least these stores that I've come to know and love are still around. And as you'll see in the film, like some of those shops that I even feature in the film have either had to move because rent got too high where they were, so they had to change locations, which can also spell disaster, or
Yeah.
they just weren't able to keep their doors open.
Without kind of spoiling points in the documentary, I do want to kind of circle just around that idea though. You went so many places. You covered so much ground. I
Yeah.
mean, what was that production schedule? First of all, like, what was the production schedule like? Because I know this has been a passion project for you for a while. But then also, were you like rolling camera on every single exterior? Like, how do you put all the pieces of that together?
So mostly I was at every location. I was able to get a few last minute ones thanks COVID because I was able to pipe in via Zoom or what have you using like
Hmm.
Elgato stick, whatever
Oh
an
yeah,
HDMI capture stick. I was able using that my shooters using that. I was able to see their shot, in some cases interviews. We were able to do that, but before COVID, it was all me and or my producer Emoto traveling from place to place, and a good deal of the footage is shot by me to the film's detriment. I'm kidding. Like there's stuff where I'm like, well, a person who does this every day wouldn't have made that mistake. I've seen so much more footage than anyone will ever see. But scheduling wise, it kind of just came about when I could afford to do it. I mean, my first equipment
gotcha.
was borrowed, and then I was able to afford my own stuff. And when I had free time. So you remember, well, you still live there. I was going to say when I lived in Los Angeles, you remember like schedules were pretty packed. And if you
Yeah,
were going to commit to a store, it's kind of an all day affair unless there's a few in that area because it takes so long to get anywhere. I mean, that's why LA plays kind of a larger role in the film. I mean, not overall narratively, but a lot of the connections that I was able to make and a lot of the store owners who were willing to let me in, I had more options there. Whereas nationally, I might get a response from a store owner here or there. And then I'd have to
hmm,
say, okay, I can travel to this state on this date, and I have to plan it a month or two in advance
right,
because whatever money that's my discretionary spending is going into the film. And then Kickstarter or GoFundMe definitely helped. And then much later, a Kickstarter certainly helped. But it was all kind of out of my pocket and when I could get to it. And sometimes I would get to a bottleneck and just not have anything to shoot. And I would have a lot of footage, but not an overall crafted narrative ready to go. So it'd be me like
yeah,
trimming and getting finer points. My wife and I, we drove cross country and we happened to go through Denver, Colorado. And I said, well, Chuck Rosansky's Mile High Comics is here. Let me ping him
yeah,
and see if I can come in and interview him. And he was very gracious, let me in. We spoke for, I want to say, an hour and 20 minutes while my wife circled the car because she's like, I have no interest in going in this. My wife's a neuroscientist and a jock, so I'm going
Fair.
to a comic store, and she's like, ew, no, I'll go find a beer somewhere or a
That's fine.
cheese, you know. And she's patiently waiting so we can get further down the cross country road here. But I ended up going back to Chuck because it was such. I mean, if you know anything about Chuck Rosansky and or Mile High Comics, incredibly important to the history of comics and comic
Yeah.
shops. That was remarkable, and being able to spend more time with him. One thing that did happen along the way, I mean, apart from COVID, which definitely ground everything to a halt, because a lot of the people I wanted to interview much older, and
Yeah.
comorbidities exist at a higher rate for older folk. I had a tragic hard drive mishap, so I ended up losing a good bit of footage. Some was recoverable via software, and then
Hmm.
I lost a lot of Chuck stuff where and it was maddening because it would recover it, but the rate of speed of the mouth and the audio were never in sync, and
Ah,
it varied. So it wasn't just that it
yeah.
was at this speed and the sounds at this speed. So I was constantly banging my head against the wall trying to make that work because I really wanted Chuck to be a part of this. Anyone who knows about Chuck or his story at all, they have thoughts on Chuck. I mean, for me, they're all good. I've only had great experiences with him, but I'll talk to
Right.
people who are like, he overcharges by this much, and it's like, right, but he'll also tell you to kiss his ass if you don't want to pay that. Like,
Yeah.
go ahead, go find it somewhere cheaper. I'm fine. That's his
Yeah.
attitude, and his store is a museum essentially, like the
I
super
actually
warehouse.
I didn't know of the owner that much. I
Okay,
knew of Mile High Comics. I feel like humanizing the stories and bringing in the individual shop owners and then people kind of commenting on the industry. There is this unique window between comic books just being this kind of disposable thing on a rack in a drugstore, decades and decades ago, to comic books, sort of dedicating their own floor space, to now in the modern era, we're all trying to turn every piece of media into some kind of streaming
right.
subscription or digital copy.
Easily digestible thing that I can have on while I
Yeah.
look at my phone.
And now, like, on my phone is like every single comic subscription, the DC Ultimate Comic Creator Pass with hundreds of thousands of comics for you to at a moment. And you're like, it's like I've got everything, which means I kind of have nothing. I'm also young enough that I don't remember a time before the proliferation of comic shops. So in my
Right.
brain, this has always just been like a potential viable business model. And it really wasn't that long ago that the idea of setting up a store to sell comic books was mocked on television.
Yeah, it's like, why would anyone want that? Well,
And
I mean,
especially you're a grown man.
right, a
Like,
grown man with a handful of comics. The idea that, yeah, people would want this. I mean, comic book stores did exist prior to I want to say the mid 1970s is when they began taking off, and I'm not using
mhm,
quotation fingers for it, but it was a very small group, and the stores that existed were all for collectibles. I mean, in the same store,
yeah,
you'll probably find a Babe Ruth or a Mickey Mantle card or some
exactly, yeah.
rare coins, stuff like that. But it was very much specifically geared towards these rare comics that you just can't find. And it's not like the poly bags, they're once I think called Bell's bags when they first came about. They weren't a thing really. Like people kept
Hmm.
stuff as pristine as they could, but there was no standardization for how to do that. When comic book stores really started to take off, it was this idea like, hey, we can sell new comic books to people. Like having a space for it is it not just from a business point of view, but from a creative point of view, from the ability to craft something for a market that's no longer resigned to like, well, Timmy and little Sarah, they have to be able to see certain things on a spinner rack in a
Right,
market that won't upset their sensibilities.
right.
Like, no, we can do whatever we want, really, as long as there's a market for it, as long as people are interested. So you get things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You get so many books out there that a creator, either a team or one person, said, I want to do something, and now I have that ability. So comic book shops really made that possible, and that's why I think they're still remarkable. Because I mean, there is the Kickstarter model now that's working pretty well for a lot of people.
Yeah,
It's a pretty great community of folks. You can get some really fascinating stuff, but the thing that lacks, and in my mind, this is one of the biggest parts of what a comic book shop is and does. There's a curation that can happen with a shop owner that really knows their audience and knows the world of comics, to the point that I don't care who you are. If you have an interest in anything other than watching paint dry, there is a comic book for you out there. And you may say this is kind of kitschy and kind of hinky, whatever, oh, it's a comic, it's for kids. Like, nah, man, there's some stuff that's going to blow your mind. And I know, again, that seems crazy for some people to hear that. They say, no, I won't enjoy that. You're looking at pictures, you're not reading. It's like, no, it's more than that. You're interpreting. The colors
Yeah.
are having an effect, like the words, the actions, the thoughts. Like, there's so much that goes into reading a comic book that defines that experience, that you come out of it. And there's a reason why, despite Neil Gaiman not being anyone's favorite person right now, people still want to see that story
Yeah.
translated in some form or fashion, or at least finished, because it's taken so long for that to occur. Because that was a singular, is, I will say, still a singular type of experience for someone who's new to a type of comic book that's not just capes and boots and we have to save the
Yeah.
universe again, Batman, or whomever.
I,
Uh,
and in a way that kind of breaks my heart that the story, because I have a very hard time separating art from the artist. It's like Sandman and Watchmen like kicked
oh
my
yeah.
butt and then encouraged me to like go back and read like some of the old Kirby stuff like Silver Surfer, and then that kind of dumped me into the really like political stuff between Green Lantern and Green Arrow. Like
Oh,
that
interesting.
that
Yeah.
whole like head to head, like, well, I'm an authority and I'm an anarchist. And it's like the odd couple, and you're like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. This is in a comic. Comics are still wild, and
Oh
they
yeah.
never really backed off. I don't know what your thoughts were on the new Superman, but I left the movie almost crying because it finally felt like, oh, that's Superman. That felt like Superman. My wife was excited, like he's a big, silly, goofy Kansas small town Boy Scout. It's
Yeah.
cornball. That is exactly what I needed my Superman to be.
Well, that's where I get a little confused. It's the Superman dynamic, and it has nothing to do with the title. My title is a metaphor. Superman's the most ubiquitous and well-known character in
Superhero
comics
genre,
history.
yeah,
Yeah, so you're shopping for you see Superman's crest on a store, comic books are sold there. That's just kind of a given. But
yeah,
the debate about Superman's been a fascinating one, because personally, thought the movie was fine. Was it the best Superman movie of all time? I'm not the one to judge. I mean, my Superman's still Christopher Reeves, and those movies are
hmm
goofy cornball and
yeah,
sometimes boring. I tried to show it to my wife. I'm like, here's the first Superman movie. And he's running along the train, in
yeah.
Smallville. And I look over and she's just kind of leaning against the couch like this. And I'm like,
Yeah, right.
okay, maybe not the Superman for you, but at the end of the day, like, Superman's such a hard thing to translate well. I mean, if you
Yeah,
want to have like Zack Snyder's Superman, people debate. There are people who are huge fans of that world and that like gritty Superman, but in my mind, Superman has rarely been a gritty character. I mean, the point of
no,
him has been hope, and I know Snyder has that in the movie, like that it's an S, it stands for hope. Like, yeah, that's a beautiful sentiment, but that's not really conveyed anywhere in the movie.
yeah.
Whereas the new one, I like I said, it was fine. Superman to me is very much a kid's world. It's like
A kid's wish fulfillment.
exactly in every way. And so
Yeah,
the thought is like, well, it doesn't really matter what me or any other, angry geek or what have you thinks. It's like, did a kid watch this and did a kid appreciate it and say,
yeah,
I want to be like Superman because he holds the values that I've been told are good things,
yep.
are aspirational.
Guys our age seem terrified of letting go of the characters we grew up with,
Yeah.
and we want them to age as cynically as we have. And I can't show my daughter. Well, I mean, she's getting older. We could. I don't think she'd enjoy them, but the Zack Snyder Superman was not a Superman I could show my, at the time, like 6-year-old daughter.
Right.
That's not a Superman she can grow up with. We spent a lot of time watching Justice League Unlimited because that Superman respected that he lived in a world made out of cardboard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
he made any mistake, someone could get hurt. Oh, Superman has to be careful. Oh, being
Yeah.
super strong wouldn't be such a great thing to have all. I mean, like my 6-year-old daughter is grokking this stuff. So we finally
Right.
get her to see this Superman, and it's goofy. She loves crypto. We
Oh,
just
yeah.
adopted a puppy, and it's like a mini crypto. She
No.
went out of her way to find a floppy-eared, shaggy, scruffy-looking mutt of a dog. Like that inspired her. And now she's going to grow up, and she's already starting to get into more like sort of tween and young adult novels and stuff like that. But it felt like we finally achieved. I could hand this off. I had that feeling with the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie.
Mm.
In
Oh,
my
I liked
entire
it. Yeah.
lifetime, in my entire lifetime, the turtles have never had a happy ending where they were accepted.
Yeah.
I'm a grown ass man leaving TMNT like fighting back tears because they finally just got to go to school and have friends. Oh my god. And I didn't know I needed that, but
Yeah.
that's the first Ninja Turtles that my daughter got to see. And it's like I think
Oh,
it's so
wow.
much richer when this was crafted for a younger audience. The capes and cowls, that was dime store, drugstore kind of content for little kids while their moms went and did the shopping and dads like went and got a soda from the soda jerk and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I fear we've latched onto it so hard that you get this refusal. Like Superman has to be dark and gritty because in real life, if I were Superman, I would just punch that guy.
Right.
That's not realistic. What's realistic is Superman would just punch that guy. It's like
Yes.
that's you're missing the point.
I had a friend who he said it perfectly to me. This was when the Chris Nolan Batman movie, the second one came out. I was all hyped up from having seen The Dark Knight. I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh man, that's the best Batman movie ever made. Oh my god, he's not wearing hockey pads. Oh, this is fantastic." And my buddy, who's one of the coolest human beings I've ever met, is just kind of I picture him leaning on something, probably had a toothpick in his mouth, and he was like, "I don't know, man. I think Adam West is probably the best Batman that has ever existed." And I was like, "You're trying to fight. You want to fight me?" Is what you said. You want me to beat you in front of your mom? That's weird that that's happening, but okay. And he's like, "No, no, no. Calm down. Calm down, my friend. Batman is stupid. Batman is so stupid." And I said, "Okay, we're crossing some lines, but I still like Batman at the time." So I was just like, "All right, what get to the point." He's like, "It's corny. Like it's goofy and corny. Rich kid can't get over the death of his parents, so he like fights he beats up poor people. Like he has all the money. He could get therapy. He could fix most of what's wrong with Gotham City. All the other bad guys show up because there's a Batman. They literally made that point in the movie that you love so much. Things have escalated because Batman exists. He is the problem." But with Adam West Batman, everything's corny. People tie you up to big typewriters. Like
Right.
that makes more sense than a guy trying to fight crime dressed as a bat and like being a
Right.
myth and all this. He's like that it's fun. He's like I enjoyed the movie, but you can't and I think that's one of the bigger problems. Nerds right now are losing their minds because of the Robert Downey Jr. is coming back as Doctor Doom, and they release
Right.
pictures of him as Doctor Doom allegedly, and it looks like Doctor Doom from the comics. And people are like, "But how can you do this?" I'm like, "Doctor Doom is cornball. Doctor Doom is my favorite
Fantastic
villain."
Four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Doctor Doom so much, but he is a messy bitch who loves drama. Like that is all Doctor
Right.
Doom really is. I mean, he my face is scarred and so I hate
And so
Richards and I
and so I
own a
will
country.
create this nation and whenever I'm mad I'm gonna take my ball and go home.
Right. And I know magic and science because I'm a better scientist than Reed Richards. And I'm just sitting here like, on the page, this works for me. On the
Yeah.
screen, no Doctor Doom. I maybe apart from the Roger Corman one from
Brilliant.
that never got released. It's never worked because it's so corny and it's so arch and cringe. But if you
Yeah.
show me a multiverse where like someone like Tony Stark is like, no, I rule through fear to make the world better, and I created this persona. We've learned in the past few years that people by and large are pretty stupid. So I could see a lot of people on the planet being like, this guy's real and he's mean and he knows magic and loves drama. It's just it's so silly, but we get so like worked up about it. I interviewed Mark Evanier. He great history, Marquez. I don't want to go into all of it right now because I don't want to mess
Hmm.
anything up because he's already probably mad at me that I didn't put him in the movie. But uh, Mark Mark has a storied path. He was one of Jack Kirby's assistants like years
Hmm.
ago. He was like, Jack made me like erase stuff on a page, and I'm like, like I can't erase your work. And he's like, that's the job, kid. You gotta do it. Uh,
Wow.
but he was talking about his Batman. He's like, my Batman isn't this Tim Burton Batman where like the
Hmm.
Joker created the Batman created the Joker. Like I don't need them to be two sides of a coin. I need my Joker to tie Robin up to a giant typewriter and
Yeah.
or ransom a reservoir. Like that's my Batman. I don't care about the other stuff. And that can sound cynical, but that's such a healthy way of looking at it because the
Yeah.
things you love will outgrow you. And they should. Like you
We
and I
should be
could sit
handing them
here.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like Star Trek should be for anyone wanting to dream. We can sit around and say what we think is wrong with it, but at the end of the day, we're not really the key demographic anymore. We were buying the Playmates toys and the silly costumes and so
Right.
forth, but we're not doing that now. We will for our kids, maybe. But and a lot of that kind of gets foisted on them, like
Well,
you're only
and
allowed to like this Batman or this Superman. Like,
well, and I've had those conversations with my daughter now. It's like, find me something you did. If it's K-pop Demon Hunters, I might not love it, but I'm gonna sit here and watch it with you. And some of the songs are actually they're bangers. I've always struggled with that notion because comics have already shown us the solution, the way out.
yeah,
Yeah, we have a seminal work like Dark Knight Returns, and I understand this what if story. Hey, what if Batman was old? Great. It's a very important piece in comics history, but I feel we learned the wrong lessons from it because instead of trying to make Superman a dark, gritty, realistic, authoritarian daddy figure,
mm,
we've got Homelander. We've got
mm,
Invincible. I've just
yeah.
it's Omni Man. We've got what was it, Jupiter's Legacy or Jupiter Ascending? I can't remember.
Jupiter's
But
Legacy. Yeah,
Jupiter's Legacy. We can go make authoritarian daddy figure quasi fascist Superman.
yeah.
We can go do that. A Superman story to me needs to be sort of, well, how was he raised? So
Right,
Superman Red Sun is a fun what if, but we're not going to live there. It's
right.
just nice to pop in for a visit and then we can get on with our lives. But if you're telling me like I need Superman to just go punch that guy in the head, that's Homelander. You don't like Superman.
Yeah.
You
No.
want him to be something fundamentally different.
I think meta commentary exists. I mean, if you want a great one, Supreme, I think Image maybe puts it out. That was great because the idea is, well, if
Hmm.
Superman existed, we can, in this other way, we can sort of take the idea of a mythos and how there could be multiple iterations of
Right.
Superman across time and how those things change. And it was a fun read at the very least. But I think talking about how things outgrow you a lot of the times, the people who grow up on the comics that we grew up on when we were reading as kids, there were those books that really changed the game, but that influenced the people who are doing the comics now. Like if you want to check out, I think one of the best comics I've read in a while that still plays with the superhero mythos is from Image called Local Man, where they take
Oh, I haven't
the
seen that.
Oh man, they take the kind of like super muscular dudes from when Image first started making comics in the 90s, and it was kind of like
Right.
throw everything at the wall, steal whatever we can if we
More
have to.
pouches.
More
More
pouches,
pouches.
more veins, more muscles. But imagine in that world, this guy existed, and now he's a middle-aged. I almost swore he's a screw up who is just down on his luck, and it's co-written and created by Tony Fleece and Tim Steely. Um, they have some great books in their own rights individually, but together, this is an incredible story that I think anyone would really enjoy. And it's built on like, hey, you guys appreciate. It's not just the nostalgia of those things. It's these are real
Right.
human stories. Saga's another one where Brian K. Vaughan and Staples they create this beautiful, expanding world that's phenomenal, east of west. Like I could go on and on about the different. I want to say Jonathan Hickman's name just because just saying east of west, no one knows what that means. But there are so many incredible books that are happening right now. I would argue right now is the best time to get into reading comics because you don't have to dig that deeply into the
No.
archives. You talk about finding books that you really loved as a kid or like having all of DC's backlog. Like I just started reading The Question the other day from the late because
Yeah.
I had no idea what The
So good.
Question was about. The
Right?
animated show gave me The Question. I'm like, this guy's weird and has no face. What's the story? And
Let's do this.
a lot of people didn't know what to tell me, and I started reading it, and it's insane. Like when they were when they
Yeah.
put together back then, it was just like, no, he goes and meets this guy named Richard in the woods after getting shot in the head and learns Hapkido or whatever. I'm like, okay, and
Okay.
there's a gas that like bonds a mask to his face, and he's a news reporter. I'm like, I'm in. Let's see where this
Yep.
goes. But no one, I can promise you, no comic book store owner would have ever recommended I read that book as a kid because I'm looking at it, I'm like,
Yeah.
the action here is very limited. The concepts are pretty broad, and there's some adult themes like crazy in here. But
Hmm.
as a grown man, I'm like, I'm kind of curious about it. You know what I mean? Like having that back catalog is great. It's better if you find it in a comic book store, not only because you're supporting a comic book store, but because the person checking you out could be like, oh, do you like X, Y, and Z? You'll probably like this. If not, no returns.
Right. Sorry. You bent the front cover. It's
Exactly.
out of our hands. I wish there was something I could do. So
Yeah.
I do want to just kind of touch on because we've sort of brought this up and we naturally just kind of talk about this stuff whenever we get a chance to chat. But I really appreciated in your film, without sort of leaning too hard into the vernacular political fights and arguments, so many of these stories helped because comic nerds back in the day were sort of a much smaller, less visible chunk of the population. And
Oh yeah.
it's kind of hurt watching some of these characters get co-opted or get misused and
Yeah.
start to represent things other than what they stood for. I mean, when people say things like that the X-Men are I hate that I'm going to say this. The X-Men are getting woke, and you're like, they only existed ever. Tell stories about other
Right.
people who might be different. That's literally the whole point of that comic,
Yeah.
and that you've got to again. You're so much more delicate than even I was just here. In books and in comics, I can show my daughter people that are different than her, or just a way to empathize, and
That's
that
the
I
key word.
feel yeah, I feel like it's lacking.
So I tried my best to see two sides of this coin because with empathy, you're trying to see where someone's coming from, and I 100% get when someone goes to a few years back. I think Hulk went from being Bruce Banner to being, I don't know the guy's name, but he's a Chinese American character, but he's now the Hulk, or Wolverine's daughter became the Wolverine, and
Hmm.
I kind of understand the frustration of a reader who is committed to a character in a certain way to feel as though a transition, a shift, like their thing is being taken away and not necessarily
Right.
given to someone else, but sort of they've created like in the way I've heard it described, it's like people are being pandered to, that it's not a creative choice that
Yeah.
has any other or any other inspiration than to make money, because if they can sell a character of a certain ethnicity to an audience or gender to an audience that hasn't been there before, then they can expand their market when they of course bring back
Sure.
these characters as whomever. And to some extent I agree with that because it doesn't feel genuine. I mean, the worst thing about advertising and marketing to Gen X was that it was just so apparent and so naked, and they were all so
Yeah.
cynical about it. Like, don't try to sell me a soda pop, man. Soda's not my friend, And
But they desperately wanted someone to sell them a soda pop. This is what I
exactly,
love
yeah,
about being on this cusp of Gen X and millennial is like we were so over marketing, but we loved it when people marketed to us
right.
sarcastically.
Oh yeah, then you had us. It's like
Yeah.
they get it.
Oh, we're
Oh
there.
yeah, the $1 $1 million brand or what multi-million dollar brand totally gets you. Obey your
Sure.
thirst, Sprite. Yeah. Little Penny Hardaway running around, Chris Rock voice. All that being said, like I can understand how it can feel not like a betrayal, but like a thing is being taken and given to no one. Because if that audience isn't there, women read comics.
Yeah.
People who are not white men read the same comics as white men and appreciate these characters. The problem, though, is that if you create a character who is not the typical sex or ethnicity,
Hmm.
the likelihood of getting a readership behind it is tricky because a lot of times they really engender that culture in that character. That's not a bad thing, but if you're not Puerto Rican and you've ever been to a Puerto Rican barbecue, there's a little bit of a learning curve when you
A little
show
bit.
up as, it's like, it's kind of loud here. Like that's not a generalization. That's just a little different from you, little white guy who likes to whisper. So
Sure.
it's, that's just my experience personally. It's like, oh, okay, all right, I can acclimate. Um,
Oh, you're not yelling at me. You're just yelling.
you're
Okay.
just
All right,
happy,
great.
man. They're just so happy that you're here, and it's like, okay, good. Yes. And so, anyway, one example aside, but it is kind of hard to create from the grounds up a character that's supposed to speak to broad demographics if
Right.
your goal is that cynical checking a box
Sure.
for those types. But I still argue the same way that, like, going back to Sandman, like translating that to a TV film, whatever, sex doesn't matter for gods. Like when people were getting up in arms about, like, well, that character is a female in the book or that character is a male in the book. It's
Right.
like these
Yeah.
are constructs, these are ideas, and the same should be true of some of our heroes. I mean, very few people had a lot of problems with Nick Fury going from being an old white man to being Samuel L.
From
Jackson.
being Hasselhoff.
Right,
Excuse
yeah,
me. He was Hasselhoff, and then he went to Sam Jackson, and we were good with that.
totally fine.
That was a good switch.
That even in
But
Ultimate X-Men, they make that point, like, "Hey, Nick, who would play you in a movie?" Like, well, hopefully Samuel L. Jackson. Like
right.
they were people were ready for it.
I've been interacting with some of my daughter's friends and stuff like that. Like the how much a character like a Miles Morales can resonate,
Yeah,
right? It's not we took Peter Parker away from you, but we gave a whole community of kids another Spider-Man,
yeah.
not replacing. There's still a Peter Parker, and now there's a Miles Morales. There's like a whole spider, universe now. I really did appreciate the sensitivity of bringing those points up in the different communities that are affected. And again, for as much as we're talking about how there's comic book movie fatigue, comics have still been the bleeding edge of storytelling in a lot of ways where you can really test ideas in some dramatic and in some really aggressive ways. And that's the kind of thing I wish that like in your documentary, and I think this is sharing a sentiment. I wish there were easier ways to treat movies and TVs like the gateway drug. Oh man, if you like that, what I guess what I got for you next,
But
and
you've got to
hand that off to
start
someone.
with those. You have to start like
Sure.
so long ago, and that can be really tricky. Like my wife wanted to watch an Avengers movie. I'm like, we got 30 movies to go through. If you want to, like, or you can just turn to me every couple of minutes and like, and what's his deal? Okay, that's Loki. He's
It's like I was reading the Three Body Problem, and at the end of every page are footnotes explaining like Chinese society and history because they knew who was reading the English translation.
absolutely, yeah.
So I know we're kind of coming up on time here. I just want to wrap up. One, I adore the movie. It's getting its official release. What is the distribution looking like? What are the plans looking like? Do you have like extra footage? Are you gonna have like some fun extras, deleted scenes, things like that? What can you share as we're getting ready to catch this documentary?
Maybe. So what I can tell you is if you pick up the Blu-ray by visiting shoppingforsuperman.com, it's the only place you can find the Blu-ray at the moment, which is fine. I'll be mailing it to you, so it will be coming from the director. But there's extra footage, there's behind the scenes, there's some bloopers. As far as interviews go, Joe Field over at Flying Colors Comics and other cool stuff out in California. Incredible dude, so important to the industry as a whole. Had the brilliant idea. He's like, you were able to recover a lot of this footage, and you have so many interviews that we don't see that much of. Could you start releasing these online? So I have a few on our YouTube channel. If you just search Shopping for Superman, you'll find us, and I get to them when I can. It's not, if you're expecting like one a week, one every 2 weeks, now
Got
that
that.
this is done, I can maybe focus on that. But otherwise, you can find us starting Friday, Apple TV, YouTube TV, Google Play, and Amazon Prime. You can rent our own Shopping for Superman. And if you would like, pick up the Blu-ray to see a little bit more of the film.
That's awesome. I'm so excited. You were talking about this when we were working together, like,
Yeah.
back in the nerdy computer building projects that we were doing, and just to finally see it realized, and not just realized, but I was pointing it out to my wife. She came in just at the opening title sequence, where it was like a dream black box musical theater set. The construction of the comic book shop, I was ready for 525,600. Like, the attention to details, the feel of that was captured so beautifully, and I just really, I really enjoyed what you put together. You're a friend of mine, and I was like, oh yeah, cool. I'm gonna dig on what Wes has to say about comics and the business and the history of selling comics. Like, he's a cool dude. And then to see you realize your vision like this was just really exciting to see.
That means a lot, man. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So we're gonna be putting this podcast out hopefully the day before, but we're saying September 19th.
19th.
19th is
Yeah.
go time for picking it up, and I'll have links in descriptions and videos and on your podcast feed reader, and with where you can get more information on this. Wes, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope it's not too long again before I get to see your face.
Absolutely. Miss you, buddy.